Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Live Through Jesus podcast with Courtney Gilmore. On this episode, Loyalty or Desertion. This is 1 Samuel 27 through 30. Have you ever known someone who got discouraged in their Christianity and they turned against God? Maybe you felt like that before too. Maybe you felt like God deserted you. You're having trouble, lots of things are going on, and it doesn't seem like He hears you or He cares. It looks as though He's not doing anything to help you. And so sometimes people that feel like that decide, God's deserted me and I'm deserting Him. I'm done. I'm walking away. And that's such a sad situation whenever that kind of thing happens. I understand why people feel discouraged sometimes because we can't see all of the things that God can see. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes. We don't understand His timing. We don't understand His ways. And so sometimes it's easy to get discouraged and feel like God doesn't care about you. But if we have a relationship with God, if God has ever done anything for us, if we've seen Him work, then we can draw on that. We can remember, hey, I've felt this way before. There's been times when I'm like, God, what are you doing? Are you working for me? And then later I see His work. And we can draw on those experiences. If we don't have experiences like that, then we need to ask other Christians. We need to say, please give me your testimony. I am a young Christian. I haven't had any real experiences with God yet. And so I believe in Him, but I'm getting discouraged because I feel like nothing good is happening in my life. And I want God to work and I don't see any evidence of it. And so I need you to help me. And I want to draw from your experience and from your relationship. And then as time goes on and we build those relationships with Him, then we feel His love, we see His work, and it's much easier whenever things are just not happening in our lives the way that we want them to, and we're questioning what in the world is going on. We can draw on those things. And that's what happens with David today in our story. David pretends to desert God and Israel, but he never could desert God because he has a relationship with Him and he knows the Lord loves him. And so he trusts in His ways and he trusts in His timing. And so if you remember last week, we left off with David saving Saul's life again, sparing Saul's life again, and the two going their separate ways. And Saul acts like he's done, like he's not going to keep fighting him. And he even says, I know that you're going to be king one day. I know that you're going to be successful, and I wish you success. But David does not either trust that Saul is going to quit pursuing him, or he's just sick and tired of looking over his shoulder all the time. And so he decides that he's going to go to the land of the Philistines and hide out there. And if you'll remember, he did this in the very beginning. Right when he first ran away from Saul, he went to the priest and he got Goliath's sword and he got some bread there. And then he went to the land of the Philistines, specifically in the territory of Gath. But he just thought that time he was going to hide out in the land, and the people recognized him and they brought him to the king. And so he got fearful for his life there, and he pretended that he was crazy. And the king believed him. And he was like, this guy's no threat to me. He's lost his mind. But who wants a crazy person hanging around? And so he just sent David away. But it's been a while, and so David goes back to the land of Gath. Now, they call this king Achish, and we're not certain if this is the exact same king with the same name, or if that is the name of their king, like the title of their king. I tend to think this is the same guy. And David just like, I already have a relationship with this guy, and maybe he'll just see that I've been running from Saul all of this time, and he'll, forgive that I lied to him and he'll let me come back. But either way, why would the Philistine king let the warrior that's been fighting against them all those years come into their land? Maybe this time, since David's come with 600 men, the king is like, sure, I could use extra people in my army. Maybe it's because, yeah, David did fight against him a long time ago, but it's been a while since that happens, and he knows he's running from Saul. And so he truly does think that he's done. He's willing to turn away from Israel altogether and live there with them peacefully. Or maybe he's just not really sure, but it's like, I should probably keep, my enemies close, and I'll just let him come in and we'll see what happens. Probably that is the case. And so he does. He lets him come into the land. And once David sees that Saul is, he's let it go. He's not going to try to, seek him out there in that land. Then he goes to the king and he says, there's no reason for me to stay here with you in your royal city. There's 600 of us, and all of our families. And so would you give us a permanent place to live in your town? And of course, this would also help David because he would be able to worship his God without, influence from the nation around him, because they would be one cohesive unit and they could do things the way that God has asked the Israelites to do. And so the king says, sure, I'll do that. And he gave him the land of Ziklag. Now, this was a town that was originally given to Judah anyway, and David is from the line of Judah. And apparently the Philistines recaptured it at some point. And so he's giving it now to David. And it says that once the king of the Philistines, the king of Gath, gave this land to David, it remained with Israel for the rest of the time that Israel was a nation. And so David has regained this territory, and it's down in the south, kind of close to Egypt, going down towards Egypt, towards the Sinai Peninsula and the border of Egypt. And so it's far away from the king, and so David is acting like a defector. The king believes that he's a defector, but all the while he is acting on Israel's behalf. And so he begins raiding areas down there in the south that the king is unaware of. And it tells us that he has raided 3 towns specifically: the Gershurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. And if you remember, the Amalekites are the ones that Saul was supposed to have defeated, all completely, totally destroyed, which is one reason that God turned away from him, because he commanded him to totally destroy them, because they're the nomadic tribe that attacked the Israelites as soon as they came out of Egypt. And God gave them victory in that battle, but he said, eventually you're going to grow as a nation, and I'm going to give you this land. And when you do, I want you to fully conquer the Amalekites. And that was Saul's job, and he failed to do it. He killed all the people, but he left the king alive, and he kept the animals alive, and that was against God's command. And that was one of the reasons that God said, you don't follow my rules, and I don't want you to be the king anymore. So these were people that were supposed to be totally defeated already. So that's one of the people that David defeated. And then we never hear about the Girzites ever again, like they're never mentioned anywhere else in the Bible. But in chapter 13 of Joshua, after the people have conquered most of the land, God goes to Joshua and he says, you're getting old. I want you to get to enjoy this land. So go ahead and divide out the territories, and then you can conquer the rest of these places in, time. And it lists some of the places that are still unconquered. The Jeshurites are mentioned there. And then another people that are mentioned is the Gazites. And so some people believe that maybe, sometimes the names get changed a little bit. This happens to us all the time now, like the first iteration of the people that came to this country, their name might have an E on it, and eventually it gets dropped or something like that. And so maybe the Gazites are actually who they call the Girzites here. Who knows? But we do know that the Jeshurites and the Gazites are 2 of the people in the land of the Philistines mentioned. And so at least the Jeshurites are, part of the Philistines, and we assume that the Girzites are too. And so these are people in the southern part of the land of the Philistines, and then the Amalekites. So David has gone out to defeat these people, and it says that he kills all the people there because if no one is alive to tell the story, then, he can't be found out by the king. But it's okay that he does this, and that's why I was telling you who these people are, because all of these people were supposed to have all been killed by the Israelites anyway. The Amalekites were supposed to have been completely wiped out, and everyone within the boundaries that God had set for Israel, that Joshua was supposed to have defeated all of them all of that time ago anyway. God didn't always give the command to kill all the people, but he did in these territories. And so it was fine that David was doing this. And so the king doesn't know anything about it, but he realizes that David has been raiding someplace because David does bring the animals of those people back. And so the king asks him, where have you been raiding today? And he said, oh, I was raiding the southern part of Judah, and then, that Judean clan that is the Jahamalites, I was raiding them, and then also the Kenites. Now, this is telling the king, instead of raiding the Philistines and the enemies of Israel, that he has actually been raiding the Israelites and their allies. And so the king thinks he's actually defected. He's like, wow, not only is he seeking shelter here, but he's fully turned against his nation, and he's fighting on my side now. And so, since that is the case, when the Philistines, all of the Philistines, decide to go to war with Israel over the Jezreel Valley, then the king of Gath asks David to go with him. Now, when I say all of the Philistines, remember there were 5 Philistine territories, and Gath was only one of them. And so he asks David to go with him, and David has to agree. What's he going to do, right? Because if he tells the king, no, I'm not going to go fight with you, then the king is going to get suspicious. And so he says yes. Now, we have no idea what his plan was once he actually got to the battlefield, because he's not going to kill any Israelites, but he also can't kill, the Philistines, and he's going to be, running from his life for everybody. And so who knows what his exact plan was, but for the time being, he says, okay, I'm going to go with him. And then as the other Philistine kings are passing by them, they see David with the king, because not only has the king decided that he wants David to fight with him, but he has made him his own personal bodyguard. This is how much he trusts him. And when the other kings see him, they say, why do you have all these Hebrews with you? Because it's not just David, it's all his 600 men. And so the king of Gath, Achish, he says, well, yes, I know that these are Hebrews and they used to fight for Saul, but David and Saul have had a fight, and he's been living in this land with me for the last 16 months, and I have no reason not to trust him. He seems very trustworthy to me, and he's even been fighting on my side already, and so I asked him to come and fight with me. And the rest of the rulers are like, yeah, you might trust him, but we do not. We know who David is. He is the one who has killed more Philistines than Saul, the king. And so we don't trust him, and we're pretty sure that even if he, what you say is true, and he actually thinks he's turned away from his people, when he gets over there and he gets in his own homeland and he sees his own people, there's no way he's going to fight for them. And then he's going to turn on us and he's going to start killing us. And so we don't trust him. We want you to send him home. And so Achish calls David to him, and he's like, hey, here's the deal. I fully trust you. I think you are an honorable man, and I would like you to fight with me. But the rest of these guys, they don't know you like I do, and they don't trust you, and they want me to send you home. And so in order to keep the peace, you need to go home. Well, in order to, look real, David says, oh, what did I do wrong? I want to fight for you. Let me fight for you. And the king's like, I know you have been, like an angel to me, but I want to keep the peace with these other kings. And so I need you to go home. And so David's like, all right, fine, I'll go home. And so he goes home back to Ziklag, and the rest of the Philistines continue north. They're traveling for another 40 miles before they get to the place that they're going. Now, in this monologue that the king gives to David, he quotes David's God twice. In the beginning, he says, you have been honest as your Lord. And then at the end, he says, you've been blameless as the angels. And this sounds weird to us because it's like, we know that this king doesn't believe in David's God, so why is he talking about David's God? And the thing is that it's not as weird to them as it is to us for them to believe in the gods of other nations, because everybody had a god of their own back then. And everybody worshiped their own god. They sacrificed their own god. They believed in a god. Every nation. Most nations had multiple gods. So to add one more god to that list means nothing to them. They have a fertility god and a rain god and all these different gods. And so that is just David's God. And they don't really know his God, and they don't pray to him, and they don't worship him, but they believe that David does. And so by invoking his God's name, he's kind of trying to flatter him. He's like, you have a great God, and you act just like your God, and you're an honest man, and all of these things. And he's trying to, flatter David so that he's not offended by being sent home. And so David obviously isn't. He's very glad. And he also accredits this to his God. Again, we have no idea what David's actual plan was, but I'm sure that he was praying to God this whole time. What am I going to do? What am I going to do about all of this? And so now that he's being sent home, he knows that God is the one that gave him that out. God is giving him the way out so he doesn't have to figure out what happens when he gets to the battle lines. And so that is the first two verses of 28. We went through chapter 27 and did the first two verses of 28. But now we're going to skip to chapter 29 because the story in 28 flips to Saul. And I want to do that next week. And so we're going to go back to 29 and see what happens to David when he gets back to Ziklag. And then next week, we'll talk about what Saul is doing during this time that the Philistines are coming to, go to war with him, and then about the war. So in chapter 29, it starts out by saying that David and his men arrive in Ziklag to find that the city is burned and their families are gone. And everyone is devastated. And it says that they cry and cry and cry until they can't cry anymore. It even says that they think about stoning David because they're so angry that he could let something like this happen to their families. And obviously David is distraught too, right? Because his two wives just got carried away also, and he's already lost his first wife because of this run away from Saul, and now he's losing two more wives because he is running away from Saul. And so David is distraught too, but he doesn't let it get to him. He doesn't let it make him turn away from God. Instead, he turns to God and he says, God, what do I do? Do I go after my wives and these men's families, or is this just another loss? What am I supposed to do? And God says, no, go after them. Your wives and their families are completely safe, and I'm going to give you victory, and I'm going to allow you to bring these people back. So go after them. And so David goes to the people and he says, hey, I talked to the Lord, and he said we need to go after our families and that we're going to recover them. And so all of the men saddled up again, went down south to try to find their families, and they get to this brook, and it says that 200 of the men are like, we are just too exhausted to cross. They've already traveled for 6 days. They're with the king, on the way to the battle, and then being sent home another 3 days. And then when they got home, they've been crying for, as long as they possibly can until they're too exhausted. And so they're like, we are just physically and emotionally done. And there's no way we can cross this brook. And David's like, it's fine. I get it. Everything has been hard. This is a lot. You stay here. Me and the other 400 men are going to go look after our families, and we'll bring them back. And so that's what they do. 400 of the men and David cross over this brook, and they're searching for their families. And then they come across an Egyptian man who is almost dead. It says he hasn't had any food or drink for 3 days. And so they give him water, and they give him cakes of figs and 2 clusters of raisins and some bread. And then when the man is, feeling well again, then the people ask him, they're like, what in the world happened to you? And he said, well, I am a servant of the Amalekites, and I was with them, and we went and we fought the southern part of the land of Caleb, and we fought the southern part of Judah, and then we burned the city of Ziklag, and we were on our way back home, and I got sick, and my master just left me here. And so the David and his men say, would you be willing to show us these men that did this to us? And he says, I'll show them to you if you promise not to hand me over to them, and if you promise not to kill me yourself. And they're like, sure, we just want our people back. And he said, okay. And so he took them to the Amalekites. They are the ones that have captured their people. And so they go, and it says they fight them all day and kill everybody but about 400 men, who end up being able to escape. And then when everybody is either dead or gone, they go back for all of their possessions and their families and realize that nothing has been taken, nothing has been used up, and all of their people are still there. And so they grab all of their possessions, their families, and they also grab all of the Amalekites' animals, and they head back to their own land of Ziklag. When they get to the brook, the 200 men meet them there. Well, the other 400 are mad, and they're like, why should we give them any of the spoils? We'll give them their wives and their possessions back, but they shouldn't get the Amalekites' animals because we fought for those. They didn't fight for those. They've been sitting here waiting, and now they would get that. And David's like, no, you're looking at this all wrong. You feel like you got this victory, but you didn't. God gave this victory to us, and he gave us these animals. And so we can't withhold from our fellow, Israelites something that God has given to us. And so then David made a rule that from there on out, every single war that is fought, when they bring back the spoils, everybody gets some, because they're a nation. And they're not going to distinguish between who is fighting and who is not, because there's going to be times when certain men can't fight and other times when they do. And so the nation is going to share it together. Then he also says that he's going to give some of the spoils to the southern tribes of Judah, the Jahamalites, and the Kenites. Oh, I forgot to tell y'all earlier who the Kenites are. So the Kenites are, some of the people that David said he raided, but then it ended up that actually the Amalekites later raided. But the Kenites were an offshoot of the Midianites, which was a nomadic tribe that was from the family of Abraham also, but only through his wife Keturah. Remember that Abraham's wife Sarah died and he married Keturah, and they had a boy named Midian, and these are the Midianites. And so the Kenites are like an offshoot of them, and that is where Moses's father-in-law is from. And so they've been a friend and, kind of family member to the Israelites all of this time. And even when Saul went to fight the Amalekites, he told the Kenites, hey, y'all are our allies, but we're about to fight. And so y'all need to get out of the way so you don't get caught in the crosshairs. And so David, when he comes back, he knows that, the Amalekites have raided Judah and Jahamiel and the Kenites. And so he gives all of them some of the spoils also. And so David has been running from Saul for a very long time, and he is now having to live in the land of his enemies just to be safe. And honestly, some people in that situation might have actually defected. Instead of pretending to, turn away from their nation and seek shelter from another nation, they would actually turn against God because they would feel like God has turned against them. God did protect David and give him shelter in the land of the Philistines from Saul, but David might have been like, yeah, but you could have just let me be safe in my own land. Why did you make me have to go here? It doesn't feel like you're working for me very much. And then God also gave him favor with Achish, but he could have been like, yeah, well, if you can do that, why didn't you give me favor with Saul? And then I didn't even have to do this. And God gave him a way out of the battle with the Israelites, whenever he was seeking it. But he could have just given him a way out of the conflict with Saul in the first place, and then that never would have had to happen, right? And so all of these things along the way could have caused David to say, God, you're not working for me, or I see that you did this for me, but, if you could do that, then why didn't you just do this? Why are you making me go through all these difficult times? And then especially whenever he gets home from the battle, he may have been very thankful to God. It's like, oh, thank you so much. You are working for me. I don't have to fight against the Israelites. I get to go home. The king still loves me. I'm here safe. And everything be fine. But then he gets back and his city's burned and all of their families are gone and his people want to stone him. And he's like, what in the world is going on, God? You don't work for me. He could have felt like that. He could have felt like God had abandoned him. Sometimes even when we see God working for us, and we're, thankful to him and we feel like we're, in a great place with God, then as soon as something else happens, then we can get right back to the place of like, wait, where are you? Why did you let this happen to me? And David could have felt like that this time, but he didn't. It says his men were in despair and he was very sad, but he went directly to the Lord. He remained faithful through all of this, refusing to desert his God and just relying on God, trusting that God had not deserted him. Even though he wasn't doing things exactly the way David wanted him to do them, and even though it wasn't in David's timing, David had a relationship with God, and he had already seen God work for him many times. And so he knew God's love for him, he knew God's power, and he trusted God's timing and God's way. And so he just continued every single setback to go to God and say, help me, show me the way. I will follow you. I'm not leaving you. I'm not forsaking you. I am going to remain faithful no matter what, because I trust that you are also being faithful to me. And so I'm going to read you several verses that talk about how God is with us and he's not forsaking us, he's taking care of us and all of that. Deuteronomy 7:9 says, know therefore that the Lord your God is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments. And then in Deuteronomy 31:8, it says, it is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you, and he will not forsake you. Do not fear. Don't be dismayed. We need to hear that. Whenever we're feeling that he's not anywhere to be seen, it's like he hasn't left you. Don't fear. Don't be discouraged. God is with you. Maybe you don't feel him with you right now because he's going before you. He's ahead of you. He's preparing things before you even get to the worst part of this, and he's going to take care of you. And so just hold tight. Deuteronomy 32:4 says, "The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of faithfulness without iniquity, just and upright is he." So we just have to remember that. Whenever we're discouraged, we have to remember that his ways are perfect and that he is a faithful God. Psalm 9:9-10 says, "The Lord is a stronghold for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Those who know your name put their trust in you. For you, O Lord, have not forsaken those who seek you." So if you don't see God, you don't know what he's doing, and you feel like he's not there, keep seeking him. You will see him. David did, right? He saw God. God wasn't maybe visible all the time. Whenever he got back to Ziklag and all of his family was gone and his city was burned, he could have thought that God was gone. But he said, "No, I'm going to seek after you, God." And he asked God, "What do I do?" And God told him, and then he brought him victory. In Psalm 25:10, it says, "All the paths of God are steadfast love and faithfulness to those who keep his commandments and his testimonies." And so, keep his commandments, remain faithful to him, and he will direct all of your paths and make them faithful and true. And then I'm going to read you all of Psalm 46. It says, "God is our refuge and our strength, a very present help in times of trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved, and God will help her when morning dawns." It's like God will help you just at the break of dawn. You know, sometimes we feel like God isn't doing anything, but he's like, "Hold tight, I'm working. And whenever you think things can't get any worse, I'm going to come in and I'm going to rescue." And you know, yeah, just like David, we might rather that God rescue us before it gets to the worst spot, right? But we have to trust that God has a way and a reason and that he's taking care of it, and just have faith. Psalm 46 goes on to say in verse 6, "The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice and the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes war cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. So be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." So wait on him. He's like, "Hey, be still. Know that I am God. I'm taking care of you. I can make war cease, and I can break the bow and the spear, but I need you to give me a little bit of time." Not because God can't do it in an instant, but because he knows there's a reason that he doesn't need to. So we have to trust that no matter how long it takes, he is going to be working for us, and he'll pull us through in the end. So we just have to trust him. And then Psalm 69:13-17 says, "But as for me, my prayer to you, O Lord, at an acceptable time, O God, in the abundance of your steadfast love, answer me in your saving faithfulness." At your acceptable time, answer me in your faithfulness. "Deliver me from the sinking in the mire. Let me be delivered from my enemies and from the deep waters. Let not the flood sweep over me, or the deep swallow me up, or the pit close its mouth over me. Answer me, O Lord, for your steadfast love is good. According to your abundant mercy, turn to me. Hide not your face from your servant, for I am in distress. Make haste to answer me. So he's like, I'm trusting in your time, but I hope it's quick because this is really hard and I'm scared, but I trust your time. So just answer me and save me, God, please. So he's asking God to save him and he's hoping in him alone. Lamentations 3:22-26 says, The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that one should wait patiently for the salvation of the Lord. His steadfast love never ceases. His faithfulness is great. He is our portion. He is the one that is going to take care of everything. So we need to hope in him, seek for him, look to him for answers, and let him guide our way. When things aren't getting resolved as quickly as we want them to, or we don't understand God's ways, then we can't turn away from him. We have to remain faithful. And if we refuse to desert our God, then he'll prove himself faithful to us. His protection and his favor and his victory and his way out may not come as quick as we want it to, and it may not come in the way that we want it to, but he is working for us. And so just because we don't see it doesn't mean that we need to doubt him. It just means that we need to wait and trust. We don't know what's happening behind the scenes, and we don't know why he's waiting. So we just have to trust that he loves us and he sees what's going on and he's working on our behalf. And then we just need to continue, like David did, to work on his behalf and let him guide us and let him rescue us, bring us the victory, bring us out, give us favor, whatever it is that we need. 1 Samuel 12:24 says, Fear the Lord and serve him with faithfulness, with all your heart. Consider what great things he's done for you. I think there was another verse that said that, behold the wondrous things he's done. Consider the great things he's done. If you will think back on all of the things that he's done for you, then you will be able to trust him better. And again, if you don't have anything like that yet because you're a new Christian, then ask someone else. Say, tell me the great things about God so that I can remain faithful to him, so that I can, be encouraged and I can keep this up until he comes to my rescue. Psalm 119:30 says, I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I set your rules before me. Sometimes that's what we have to do. We just have to choose to be faithful. Everybody that I have ever known or ever heard of that has turned away from the Lord, they've made that conscious choice. It's like, he's deserted me and I'm done with him too. Or they've been in a situation where they're like, God, where are you? Where are you? Show me the way. And he shows up. And they draw closer to him and they follow him. And so both of these are a conscious choice. We want to be the ones that can say, I have chosen the way of faithfulness. I have set your rules before me. Proverbs 3:3-8 says, Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So, don't let anything separate you from your God. David didn't let anything separate him. He did not defect. God did not desert him. He's not deserting you. Don't desert Him. Remain faithful. Look to Him for guidance. He'll pull you through. Last couple of verses that I want to read to you. Romans 8:31-39 says, "What then shall we say to these things? If God is for us, then who can be against us? He who didn't spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how will He not also with Him graciously give us all things?" So He's like, if He was willing to give His Son up, what else is He willing to do for us, right? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. And who can condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died, and more than that, He's the one that was raised and is at the right hand of the Father, who is indeed interceding for us right now. Who can separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, famine, or nakedness, or danger, or sword? It is written, "For your sake we are being killed all day long. We are regarded as sheep to be slaughtered." No, in these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels nor rulers, nor present or things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor angels or rulers, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God who is in Christ Jesus. Don't let anything separate you from God. No tribulation, no distress, no persecution, no lack of food, no lack of clothing, no lack of safety. Don't let anything take you away from God. 2 Corinthians 4:7-18 says, "We have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. We are afflicted in every way, but we're not crushed. We are perplexed, but we're not driven to despair. We are persecuted, but we're not forsaken. We've been struck down, but we're not destroyed. Always carrying in the body the death of Christ, so that the life of Jesus might be manifest in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifest in our mortal flesh. So death is at work in us, but life in you. Since we have the same spirit of faith, according to what has been written, I believe and I spoke. We also believe and we also speak, knowing that He who raised the Lord will raise us also with Him and bring us with you into His presence. It is all for your sake, so that as grace extends to more and more people, it may increase thanksgiving to the glory of God. So we do not lose heart. Though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. The light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. So we will not look to the things that are seen, but to the things that are unseen. The things that are seen are transient, but the things that are unseen are eternal. So if you can't see God working, that just means He's not a temporary, physical thing that we can see at the moment. But God's things are eternal. They last. They matter. And so we need to focus on those things. We may feel like we are afflicted in every way, as this verse says at the beginning. And it says, that these people are crushed, but we're not crushed. And we might be confused, but we're not in despair. We may be persecuted, but we haven't been forsaken by our God. They can strike us down, but they can't destroy us because we have God on our side. Very last verse, 2 Thessalonians 3:3 says, "But the Lord is faithful. He will establish you and He will guard you against the evil one." So don't let anything separate you from God. Do not turn away from Him. remain faithful, and you will see his faithfulness. That's all I have for you today. If you would like this podcast in written form, you can go to livethruJesus.substack.com. You can become either a free or a paid subscriber there. The free subscribers do not get the full lesson, but they do get a blog post emailed to them each week that is just the application of this lesson. And I also teach that lesson as a devotional on a separate YouTube and podcast channel called Live Through Jesus Weekly Devotions. So I'd love for you to go and subscribe over there because I talk a little more in detail about application, but it's a much shorter lesson than this. And then if you want the full lesson, then that is paid, but it's only $6 a month or $60 a year. And then you get every lesson emailed to you each time that I teach it. And you also get access to all the previous lessons that began in Deuteronomy. And with a digital study, you can just click on all of the passages and then they just come right up. So it's very easy to study a lesson that way. Also, if you want to do it with a Bible study group, it is much cheaper than buying books for everybody because you can just get one subscription and then print out all your materials. So please join me at livethruJesus.substack.com either as a free or a paid subscriber because there's extra things over there that you're not going to get from this podcast. And then also subscribe to the Live Through Jesus Weekly Devotions podcast so you can get that short little part also. And then I'll see you back next week. Thanks and have a good day.